Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. And today, we're being joined by Edward Segal, author of Crisis Ahead, 101 Ways to Prepare for and Bounce Back from Disasters, Scandals, and Other Emergencies. Edward, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you, Paul.
We are thrilled to have you. Are you ready to begin?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Don't give up. Writing can be an incredibly frustrating, but an incredibly rewarding experience. And all writers have good days and bad days. We tend to remember the good days more than the bad, but you really have to take the good and the bad when you're writing the book. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes there are rough spots, sometimes things go incredibly smooth. But overall, it's a great experience, and the message is don't give up, even when you're having a bad day. Keep at it, keep at it, keep at it.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Deciding which way you want to go. You can do self-published, which has its own challenges and opportunities. It means you're in greater control of the publishing process from beginning to end, but it also means you have to be the CEO of essentially a business where you are running every aspect of the business, and you have to be responsible for every aspect of writing, editing, producing, and marketing your book. So again, it's good if you want to have as much control as possible. The other option, of course, is to try to get a book deal with a traditional major publisher. But that has its own challenges as well. Most publishers won't even look at your book proposal unless you're represented by a literary agent. So even the task of finding an agent to represent you can take months or longer. And then after that, they have to sell the book to a publisher. So it could be anywhere, from a 2 to a 5 year or longer period if you go the traditional route. The good news about that is that you don't have to worry about all the things you'd have to worry about if you were self-published. You'd be turning over all of those decisions about the editing, the production, and the marketing to a major publisher. So there's benefits and advantages on both ways. But it could be a very difficult decision for a first-time writer to decide how they want to go.
And which path did you go with?
I've done both. I've published 3 books over the past several years. My first book was traditionally published with John Wiley. The book was called Getting Your 15 Minutes of Fame. It was a business marketing book. I went the self-published route with a book on public relations for the real estate industry. And then I went back to the traditional route for my new book on crisis management. The first book took about 5 years to see the light of day and actually be published, and that included the time it took for me to find a literary agent. The self-published book was much faster. It was about 6 or 8 months from the time I had the idea to when it was published. But then for my third book, again traditionally published, it took a couple, 3 years for the whole process to play out. So I can't say which way you should go, because there are benefits and advantages, and it just depends how much control you want, how patient you are willing to be in the process, and how many obstacles you're willing to face and surmount. But whether it's self-published or traditional published, there are obstacles, there are opportunities, there are benefits and disadvantages. But it has to be a personal decision. There's no cookie-cutter, one-size-fits-all answer for writers.
Well, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launches that has worked well.
The most successful strategy I've used for each of my 3 books has been public relations. The more visibility you can get, the more news, the more interviews you can have with the publication, even writing a byline article, be on a podcast such as this one. Those are all great ways of cutting through the clutter, getting the attention of potential readers, potential buyers for your book. And the more publicity you do for your book, the more credibility you're going to have for the finished product. And everyone knows you can buy an ad and say whatever you want, however you want, as many times as you want. But you can't buy a good story in the Wall Street Journal or Fast Company or Forbes or any of the hundreds of trade publications. You have to be a good storyteller. You have to have a good story to tell in the first place, and you have to get the interest and the attention of editors, reporters, podcasters, bloggers who are going to be interested in sharing your story with their readers, their viewers, their listeners. But if you can get that attention, if you can tell a story about your book, why you wrote the book, then the publicity is going to do wonders to help sell your book. And I've had dozens of media interviews, blog posts, podcasts since my book came out. And almost from the day one, the book has been in the top 5 and the top 10 of the recently released books on public relations on Amazon. So that's a great way to measure success, but you have to be a good storyteller. And it's less about telling a story about the book. It's more about telling your own story as the author of the book. There's an old saying in the news business that you cannot interview a book. Reporters want to interview the author. So you have to be the storyteller. You have to be the human face of your book. But if you can do a good job of that and get the attention of the media, that's a great proven way to help sell your book, promote your book, and to make the book and yourself a success as a writer.
Well, speaking of books, I'd like to know what is your favorite book and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Well, I'm a big follower of books about leadership because my latest book, of course, is about crisis management. An important part of crisis management is being a leader and leading your organization or company through a crisis. So I'm also a big fan of Doris Kearns Goodwin. And a couple of years ago, she wrote a great book called Leadership in Turbulent Times. And it's about politics, it's about government, but politics and government are also often the scene for crisis situations. So it was really interesting to see how she examined various presidential candidates and political candidates, the turbulent times they went through, the lessons that they learned, and how those difficult times for them and the country helped to make them better leaders. So I highly recommend her book on leadership.
And for our final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Well, it's another crisis-related quote. During World War II, then British Prime Minister Winston Churchill said, "When you're going through hell, keep on going." And I think that's a great advice in trying to get through a crisis. It's a great piece of advice for writers trying to write their first book. You're going to have good days and bad days. Some days may seem like hell, but as Churchill said, when you're going through hell, just keep on going.
Absolutely. Well, Edward, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
You can visit my website at publicrelations.com. That's publicrelations.com. There's information about my book, how to buy the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and independent bookstores. And there's great information about my background as well, links to my blogs, and my recently launched podcast called Crisis Ahead, which is all about crisis management.
Edward, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you, Paul. It's great to be with you.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.